Because like if you'd been told beforehand and you'd still like misgendered them, then I would say yeah, it makes more sense. But if no one like forewarned you, like
Yeah, like how was I supposed to know? You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, no, I totally get that.
And again,
Just like when Sarah thought her professor
was a guy or was a chick? Exactly, yeah.
was a woman. Yeah, no one told her beforehand. She just from what evidence she had, which was her professor's voice, she just assumed that her professor was a woman. So it's like
Yeah, it just, and again, like it wasn't even the fact that see, I keep saying it, the fact that this person said that they prefer to be called something other than she. It was the way they said it. This person was such a dick about it.
I mean, at the same time, I feel with this kind of topic, I feel like I shouldn't really talk too much about it since it's outside kind of my scope of experience personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like a better approach is to not take the aggressive one right off the bat.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in any situation, if you have a disagreement with somebody, just sit down with them, have a reasonable conversation, tell them the way you feel. If the person's respectful enough to agree to, concede their point of view to yours, then that's the end of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, hi, Browns.
Hello, Browns.
We're not brown.
Hi, whites.
There you go.
Whoa! No, I'm not white.
You're not white. You're right. Irish people are the blacks of the whites.
Yeah, he gave me a pass.
Hobby gave you a pass?
Yeah, he said, I'm not dating a white person. You're Irish. That doesn't count. And I said, oh.
Does that mean I don't count because I'm Jewish?
Irish is
yeah. Oh, no, Hobby's already given you a pass before, too. I think you just don't remember.
No, they're the natives of the white people. Oh. That's an even worse situation to be in. Hey, you all showed up finally.
Woo! Woo!
Welcome.
Woo!
Who's going to speak to trees if you are here?
Who's everyone? Who is everyone?
Hi.
Oh, hi, Luke.
Wait, Luke's been here the whole time?
No, Luke just got here.
Five?
Oh, okay. Hi, Luke.
Hi, brother Tom.
Hi.
Hi.
What's going on, chaps?
Well, I was at a thing for school.
Why were you in Lombard?
Okay, so basically, this is a long story. Well, I mean, it's just like pointless. It's a boring long story, It's not like an interesting long story.
Make it fun.
So I was fighting this dragon, and I took out my long sword, and I named it Slash, like the guitarist from Guns N' Roses, but I didn't want it to be like Sting, and like I was like, people might make the connection, but still. And then I was like, I'd rather make them Guns N' Roses than Hobbit reference, thinking I'm ripping off J.R.R. Tolkien. And
Tolkien.
How did I say it?
Token.
What is it?
He's not the token black.
Anyways, and then I got this scholarship for school through Dennis Barcima, pretty much the god of the business college, because they all worship him because he donated so much money and built the school and everything, which is awesome. But they definitely worship him too. And anyway, so I got a scholarship through him, through his foundation or whatever, and for social entrepreneurship. And so then I went to that award ceremony, and then because of that, I got invited to this one too, where his wife got acknowledged by the business college. So I went to this today, and it's actually really good. There was like 4 speakers. Well, they weren't speakers. They all received awards. And at the very end, there's the 4th speaker who is CEO for AT&T Wireless or something. And he gave a really good speech. It was awesome. And then he wrote a book too. I forget his name now, but he signed and everything for me. And like everyone else that was there too. So that was a pretty cool event. And then I came here.
How long did the ceremony take?
2 hours?
That's not terrible.
Yeah.
For a school
Was it a
ceremony.
lunch?
And I got free food.
Oh, fuck yeah. Well, that makes
What kind
it
of free food?
I love free food. Oh, it was chicken with potatoes and green beans, a salad, cookies, and coffee.
Nice. I just made some chicken tenderloins and spinach. It was great. Spinach.
You're gonna love what you eat.
You're gonna like the way you look. I guarantee it.
Someone please sponsor us.
What have y'all been up to?
The brown yells?
Yeah, the brown y'alls.
Ah.
Ah.
You know, busy. Busy.
Some busy browns.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were really busy last Friday.
Why? With what?
So Eric had class all day, and then later on in the evening, oh yes, we went to Culver's, and then right after Culver's, Eric and I were both in this like student panel thing for these kids, that were visiting Point from Chicago. Where were they from? From like Lake Park, correct?
I don't know
Or
exactly.
Oak Park,
where.
or
Oak Park?
Lake Park.
That's where
Can't
Hadley
remember.
grew up.
Wait, Oak Park or Lake Forest?
Oh,
No,
Lake
I'm from Lake
Forest,
Forest.
maybe. That was it.
I'm from Lake Forest.
I'm from Oak Park.
I'm from Algonquin.
I'm from Lake Bluff,
I'm from my mom.
but I went to Lake Forest High School. Suck on that.
But yeah, so then we went to the panel thing. That was like a few hours, and then we helped set up for the powwow, which was on last Saturday. And then I went to work literally right after that, and Eric probably just went home and slept because he had like a super long day.
What tribes, I should say, were attending the powwow? Like, what
All
was
of
it
them.
for?
So every year a school, Arrow, the club that we have here,
Right.
in the Native American Center, we have the students just put together like a powwow every year. I think this was like the
45th.
45th powwow that they had. But it was like really sad because Andy Goki, he was pretty essentially like in charge of our Native American Center for like a disgusting amount of years, and he just like did a lot of things for like Native American students and like building like a really good relationship with like Menominee, so like our forestry students can use their forests and things like that. And he passed away the weekend before the powwow, and so like they did like a dance and stuff for him.
So it was like partly like a memorial service.
Yeah, but I mean it was like around the same time we always have the powwow. They just like did like something special for him. Because he essentially, like, people didn't know if we were going to have a powwow anymore when he retired. But everyone kept it going for him. But now he's gone.
Damn. So what is going to happen going forward then? Are they going to keep doing it every year, or probably not?
I mean, it depends on like the people that are in Arrow. Whoever is in Arrow is going to keep it going.
Well, we have like a Native American center at the school, and like part of the like issue this year was like the lady that was just hired to run it this year quit like a couple of weeks before the powwow. So then they like weren't even sure if they were going to have it because like the lady that was in charge of doing it quit. So then like one of the student leaders, I think of
Arrow.
I think it's like the diversity council actually.
Oh, okay.
Like she did that, and then she asked one of the like assistant deans of the college to help. And so
we're talking about that girl Bree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the
no, she's
volunteer.
part of Arrow too.
Is she? Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. And then one of the deans, they just kind of put it together this year.
Like helping like, cause you have to like pay like the MC and like the drummers, and then the people who come and like dance in the powwows, they get like prize money for doing that too. So I mean, like, and then we also have like a feast, and so that obviously costs like a lot of money to feed everyone that comes to the powwow.
That's cool.
Yeah, but that's like super shitty too, because I guess like every year we have our powwow. Madison likes to have their powwow the same week as us to like steal all of the people from our powwow to go to theirs, obviously, because they're like a bigger school.
Fuck, man.
Switch up.
Yeah, and so like our school like switched our powwow last minute, so like people wouldn't go to Madison's. Like Star Power was supposed to be this weekend, and they switched it to last weekend, kind of like without like that much time. So like we didn't really have a lot of people at the powwow this year.
Those fucking badgers.
Yeah, those bitches.
Yeah.
They think they're hot shit.
Get out of here.
Get out of here.
Okay, so what were your roles in the powwow? Like, what were you actually helping out with?
I was just sitting at my booth for like the natural resources office.
Okay, so you were doing a tabling event.
Yeah, that's what I was doing. Adela was more hands-on than me. I was getting paid, so
Can't complain, right?
nope.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just like was just helping out with anything they like really needed me to, but I was mostly like in the kitchen helping like make fry bread and like getting shit together before our feast was about to happen, which was like super stressful. But it was like super nice because I volunteered last year and like everyone in Arrow like remembered me, like they remembered my name, which I thought was like
nice.
super nice. And then like at the end of the powwow, I'm not sure like what it's called, but they do this like they walk around with like all the dancers and then like whoever like put the powwow together, they make these like essentially are these like blankets and inside of them are just like a bunch of like little gifts that they give out to everyone. And they were like really nice and they like let me like walk with them for that. Like they asked me if I wanted to. And then I also got to like help out with like the raffle. It was like all of the girls that were Arrow were like, hey, you're gonna give one of the prizes away.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, thought that was nice of them.
Yeah, definitely. Huh. I want to go to a powwow with you guys.
We have a really big powwow. Well, not we. I should say Ho Chunk Nation does, but I technically am an intern for them now. But
Just say we.
we okay. They have like a really
position,
big
Adela.
Yeah.
what?
I said you got to own your position.
And take responsibility and be a leader. There you go.
But they have like a super big powwow Memorial Day weekend. For like it's like really big, I guess, because for like Ho Chunk Nation has like the highest amount of veterans. So
Out of
they have
any federally recognized tribe or in Wisconsin?
I think just maybe in Wisconsin, but I think even like nationally they're pretty high up there as well.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, they take a lot of pride in their veterans.
I'm pretty sure that
Just love killing.
well, I haven't talked to
Oh
him
my
about
gosh,
You right.
that's not true.
What?
I haven't talked to him about it recently, but I think that Ezra's invitation to go to the Chicago powwow, it still stands.
Oh, nice. I actually learned about how like the Native American Center in Chicago came to be. It's actually like pretty cool.
Explain.
Okay. So, during the Indian Relocation Act, which essentially was bribing, I guess it wasn't really bribing tribes, but around that time they wanted to, I guess, dismantle reservations and the whole BIA system. The United States just didn't want to take care of Native people anymore. And so they came up with this program that was called the Relocation Act. And essentially government officials were going onto reservations with these like little flyers and were like, hey, come to Chicago, come to Minneapolis, come to Denver, come to all these major cities and you guys will find like better jobs and have a better life and be city folk. And they were hoping that when they did that it would like assimilate them faster, which it kind of did, but then it kind of didn't because what was happening was a decent amount of people were doing the job trainings in the city that came with the relocation program that they were a part of, and then they would go back to their reservation, or they didn't like the city, and so they would go back to the reservation. But essentially what happened was with a lot of them, when they went to the cities, they faced a lot of discrimination, so a lot of them weren't able to find like proper housing or like get jobs after like the relocation job that they were given like ended. And so they like essentially were forced into like these ghettos and made like their own community, like any minority community does in the city. Like if you look at like Little Village in Chicago, that's like mainly all Hispanics, or Chinatown. So essentially that happened, and there was all of these, like city folk like essentially problems that were on the reservation, like poverty, alcohol and drug abuse was happening in the city, but now like they also had the added factor of like gangs and shit. Yeah. And so women, which is like really cool, a lot of like Native women kind of like band together and were like, the relocation people, the people are in charge of relocation, they don't really give a shit about us if we're doing okay in the city or not. Don't care if we have housing or if we're able to feed our families. The BIA doesn't really care about us, so let's just do our own shit. And so like all of these women came together essentially and kind of took on the role as like social workers and like community program committees, and that's how like the Native American Center in Chicago came to be. There's also like the very first Native American Center was in Minneapolis, which is like super cool. There was a job there I really wanted a few months ago, so I thought that was like really neat that that's like the same one from like the 1960s that's still around. But yeah.
Yeah, at one point, I had talked to David Bean, who is one of the associate directors of the American Indian Center in Chicago, and we talked about me possibly coming out and like him giving me a tour of like the facility and just talking about like what I wanted to do and stuff. But they were in the process of relocating to a new location, and I haven't heard
Oh,
from
really?
them. Yeah, it never really happened just because there was so much they had to do. I didn't want to keep pressing him about it.
Yeah, do you know where they're moving to?
They already have moved, I think. That was almost a year ago. I haven't really followed up on it because I've been so busy. I can look it up right now, though.
Because I remember looking at the Native American Center a few months ago, and they're like in a really like Indian part of town. I don't mean like Native American Indian. I'm talking about like
Buddy Indian?
Yeah, like Buddy Indian part of the city.
All right, let's see.
Like there's all these like Indian grocery stores and like temples and stuff.
Yeah, buddy.
Huh, interesting. So, it seems that the AIC in Chicago actually predates the Minneapolis one, if what you're saying is correct, because this one's saying it was founded September 7th, 1953, and it says right here on their website that it remains the oldest urban-based Native membership community in the United States.
That's cool.
But it looks like they're located on Onsley or Onsel Street in Chicago, which is right by
Kimball. Oh, okay. Yeah, so it's in the Albany Park.
Yeah, Ansley.
Ainsley.
Sorry.
Is it Ainsley?
No, it's not Ainsley. It's Ainsley.
It's off of Lawrence and Kimball.
Yeah, so
or the main
streets.
streets.
Yeah, right by Kimball.
Right by the Kimball. I got robbed there once.
It's weird because I think that's where they said that they were before. I don't know if they finished moving then yet, or maybe they didn't change their thing on Google or whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
Then how the hell are we supposed to know where the Native American Center's at?
You're not.
Where are y'all at?
It's invitation only.
I have a question.
What?
Didn't you say that Ezra is Ho Chunk?
No, Ezra is Chippewa and Lakota.
Oh, okay.
Chippewa Falls,
I'm
baby.
not positive.
He's an Anishinaabe.
I believe he's Oglala Lakota, but he might be Hunkpapa. I don't remember.
That's cool.
So I had a question for all of you, and Hadley, this includes you, because you might be painting, but I don't give a shit. I'm going to ask you anyway.
Okay.
So I was discussing this with a colleague recently, and I just wanted to get y'all's opinions on this, just because this is something that obviously is talked about frequently, but as 4 people, I mean 5 including myself, but as 4 people who are aware and involved in this particular issue, I want to know why that you all think that there's so much either resistance to or ignorance of the issue of climate change. Like, why do you think that so many people still, with 98+% of scientists agreeing that it's happening, why do you all think that the public...
Who are the 2%?
Yeah.
This is
well,
this
they're
growing up
corporate
seeds
sponsored
right now.
scientists.
Sure that.
But why do you think that there's still such... And it's not as much as it used to be, but why do you think that there's still such a strong coalition of anti-climate change public groups and just people in general? I can't wrap my head around it. I don't understand it.
I'm happye that you bring this up, because actually, in anthropology, we just watched, I'm linking it now, a great little documentary with Bill Nye, Arnold Schwarzenegger, about climate change and people that deny it. And they kind of put it in the parameters of,
That
like,
sounds interesting.
the 5 stages of grief.
Oh, interesting.
And, like, they explain people's denial in, like, each of those stages. And it's kind of a little silly in that Bill Nye's, like, he's the one going through the 5 stages of grief, and, like, Arnold's his therapist, and then it has, like, fun little informational sections, and he confronts people about it, and it's only, like, 40 minutes long, and it's a really good documentary I'd recommend.
Well, since you spoke up first, Hadley,
Oh, no.
that documentary aside, from a non-environmental studies and or natural resource related field, in your own personal experience, why do you think that people are resistant to the idea of the fact that climate change is happening?
Well, I think there's a large group of people that believe it's happening, but it doesn't benefit them in the now to care about it. I think there are other people that are just not, like, trusting of scientists in general, or not trusting of being told things about the world. So I don't know. I think that's part of it. I mean, not saying that everyone who's a climate change denier is as far gone as, like, someone who believes the Earth is flat, but
let's not even
it's
get into
kinda
Diego
like...
Bravo, folks.
Yeah. But I think because, like, I think people just aren't informed enough, because, you know, there are some people that are like, how could there be global warming when it's, like, the coldest winter we've ever had, you know, stuff like that. It's just misinformation or not having the proof right in front of them, or seeking more information on the topic other than, like, you know, the basic things like, oh, it's a really cold winter. Psh, it's not heating up.
Thanks, Obama.
Yeah. That's my hot take on that.
Okay. Interesting.
I agree with everything that Hadley just said. I think a lot of it is, just like she was saying, misinformation. Like, they're expecting, you know, 2 different things. Like, a lot of these people went through, like, the big global warming scare, and they're expecting, you know, it's just gonna keep getting hotter and stuff like that, when, like, in reality, like, these are all very slow, gradual changes, and, like, they're not gonna be, you know, noticed on, like, a large scale, probably for thousands of years from even now still. And all we're gonna see right now is just, like, we have weird, you know, weather patterns, like, you know, our winters are not the same as they used to be. And, like, I know a couple of episodes ago we talked a little bit about, like, an example that I witnessed personally is just, like, the change and movement of, like, trees northward to, like, as it's getting warmer, like, you're seeing the natural range of a lot of, like, balsam fir are going even more northward. And, like, in Wisconsin, like, you can't really plant, like, Colorado spruce anymore because they're not growing, they're not getting that, like, climate that they need. And it's just, they don't know what to actually be looking out for, and they don't just understand, like, the different ways that this is going to show in the different parts of the world. Because it'll never look the same anywhere in the world. Like the way Russia is going to get climate change, and the way India is going to get affected by climate change, and the way California and Sao Paulo and Ecuador, they're all going to be hit with climate change, and it's just going to look totally different in each of those different sections. So they're expecting like a universal effect, like something like the day after tomorrow, where there's just going to be like giant snowstorms and crazy hurricanes and shit like that, when it's in reality it's just going to be much more subtle.
And in ways we can't really predict, because the world is so much more complex than we have instruments to measure it.
That's very true.
Adela?
One of my really big things why I think people don't believe in climate change is I think that people like to believe that this world that we have created here in America is permanent. I don't think that people like to stop and reflect like, oh shit, like the way the earth wants to react to things is going to react to it no matter what we do. Like we don't have any control of it. To an extent, I mean, obviously, like, there's things you could do to stop, like, or I guess, like, help aid climate change. But, like, for instance, I used to see this car driving all the time when I used to work at the elementary school in McHenry. And it was one of those big, giant douche Ram trucks, the ones I'm talking about.
Lifted,
guys with the real big dicks.
Yeah, and it had the giant smokestacks on the side of the car that would guzzle out black smoke that would just stay in that area for like 10 minutes after they drove away. And on the back of his car, the whole entire back of his bumper and back window had stickers that said climate change is not real, and pictures with the earth and like an X through it. Like, if you have to be so completely ignorant to the fact that you think that we are permanent beings here on this planet. Like, do you know how many different seasons this planet has gone through? There were dinosaurs on here. We had an ice age at one point. Like, we're not permanent beings. Like, we could literally get wiped out in any moment. But people just want to pretend that we have, I don't know, that we maybe have control over the shit that could happen to us on this planet when we really don't. Like, we just really don't. And, like, it's, like, super interesting, like, I think, like, looking at, like, how, like, native tribes, like, when I was a few weeks ago, like, on Menominee, like, just the way, like, how they understand that, like, how they make sure to, like, how they have, like, this beautiful forest on Menominee that they've literally had for, like, thousands of years, that they've managed to, like, take care of. And they do that because they understand that future generations are going to be using that. Or they know to protect our water because they want future generations to have water. And just all of these other things, like, it's just insane to me that, like, people don't get that, like, we could, like, there's parts already in the world, like in Mexico, where they don't have water anymore, and they have a water truck come once a week to drop off water that needs to last that you need to use for 7 days. Like, that's just insane to me.
I mean, not even Mexico. Like, California literally had a giant river system diverted so that they can get water to Los Angeles. I mean, to kind of go off of that, I think a lot of people also, like, when they hear climate change and stuff, they're expecting, like, the end of the earth, when in reality it's like,
it's all of these little things.
The earth is going to be fine. Like, whether we keep, if we can increase our coal production and only use coal and shut down every windmill and, like, hydropower and nuclear, like, energy source that we have, and only pump out coal, and we can turn the skies black with smog, and the earth is going to be fine. What's going to happen is we're the ones that are going to suffer from it. And once we're gone and everything else, kind of takes place after that, we're the ones that are going to suffer from it, not the Earth. The Earth will be fine. The only thing that's going to hurt the Earth is a fucking comet or something like that. Yeah,
old torrid meteor stream.
Yeah.
Luke, you've been silent so far.
So, there's one big thing, but I want to say that last. My biggest, like, we all have our own worldview, and we all have our own individual micro and macro views of the world through which we see, and I think everything that everyone else says is correct, you know. And there's one big thing that I think as humans has guided us to not believe in climate change, but I also think that a lot of humans tend to overlook the simple physical cause and effect that happens when simple things happen. You know, like, we don't, like, most people don't even realize, like, how, like, drinking a Coke is bad for you in the long term if you did that every day piled on top of each other compared to just having a water during that time. Like, the exponential effects of that upon your body is so strong, you know. And I mean, I drink Coke and shit every once in a while, but, you know, I've been a lot less recently when I truly notice the effects that it just has on my body in the momentary, you know. Like, it has a like huge dampening effect upon your energy levels and everything. But you know, I don't feel like humans recognize how the exponential effect, like, they understand through stock market how compounding interest can build your wealth, but they don't understand how cutting down trees and putting up pavement can compound the increase of CO2 and decrease of oxygen within our atmosphere, and then how every little bit of combustion from our engines can add to it, you know. And just how much of nature has become human use, where there is nothing but concrete that is doing literally nothing to add to our ecosystem. They don't understand fully how that can affect the world on a macro aspect or even the micro aspect. And like, they have just complete failure to recognize any damage that could cause. Like, it's obvious, like, when you look at what like, this used to be a prairie, now it's this. Like, and you can see it, like, just from that physical level of aesthetic of how that looks different. But then there's all the other equations that go into it, and it's such a complex thing to think about that most people are like, well, fuck that, that's too hard for me to even grasp with my fucking puny mind, so I'm just going to think about video games and the news who lay it out in a very simple terms for me to understand it. I don't want to use that thinking of my mind to actually think about this type of things. It just scares me. And I can't even deal with my own life, let alone the lives of every other human on the planet, you know. And so that kind of leads me to the biggest point. I think it has to do with politics, honestly. I think the only reason why climate change has not been, and the only reasonable explanation I can give to why climate change has not been fully recognized by every single human, because I've noticed change in weather, and, like, is strange. I know that it's strange, like the weather that we have and different, like, occurrences throughout, and just, like, air quality and, like, taste of food. It tastes literally different. I mean, it might just be the way we're processing it now, but I don't know. There's so many different things that have changed over just in my direct lifetime. And so I think the main root cause of all of it is politics, because politics, it kind of goes back into, you relate to being a Republican, you relate to being a conservative, a liberal, and you relate to this party because they said a few things that you agreed with, and you're like, well, they probably have more that I agree with, so I'm going to stick with them. And you know, you form a group identity with them, and you give yourself to them because you think that they know better, because you, like, it's easier to follow someone than to listen to yourself, because when you listen to yourself, you fail. And most people don't know how to deal with failure, because we've evolved from these humans that just like we're scared of everything, and we had to build these cities in order to feel better, you know, and to provide safety. And now we have these cities, and we're still searching for more security and safety in everywhere we go, because something could fuck it up and ruin our idea of the future. And we also have this consciousness of that there's going to be a future, and that there was a past, and things were terrible at one point, and I never want to be that terrible again, you know. So I'm going to act this way, and then these people seem to know what's right, so I'm going to follow them. And instead of truly like being observant of your natural surroundings and what's going on in your life and what's going on in your people's lives, we live in this superficial aspect of life as to protect ourselves, because that would just be easier. You know, it's hard to deal with things on a real legitimate level, and it kind of even like brings me to my life, you know, actually. So like a few days ago I found my dad was in the hospital, and a few days before that I was really worried about his health. You know, I saw him, I was like, he kind of doesn't look the same, you know, and I was like, well, I believe in God, so I prayed for him, you know. I'm like, well, God, take care of this. I'll if I notice anything maybe that I can do, I'll do it, you know. But until then, like, I hope you take care of him. And basically, he went to the hospital because he has pneumonia, and so he's in the hospital now. And then when I found that out, I was grateful, you know, because I was like, you know, he needs to be healed, you know. That's what needs to happen, you know. And normally my thought would be, oh, he's in the hospital, he has a potential for death, but focus on the potential for life. And, you know, I think that we as humans tend to focus upon the negative aspect of the worst thing that could happen is going to happen. And when we're focused on that, we have to build a wall again, you know. And by building that wall, we separate ourselves from reality, because reality doesn't need a wall. Reality needs us to keep on trudging into the darkness and overcoming the darkness. Reality is not building a wall so we don't have to sin the darkness, because then we just give ourselves an artificial darkness, which we can't. There's no way out of it because we create it, so we have to destroy ourselves in order to destroy the darkness, you know. And then once we destroy the darkness, now there's real darkness, you know, that we truly have to deal with. And this is a lot of a philosophical and psychological approach to why climate change isn't recognized. But, you know, like, overall, I think that people are too afraid. Carl Jung refers to the shadow self, and the shadow self is all the things that you're afraid to admit about yourself and face, you know. And it's deeper than that. It's a lot deeper than that. He wrote, like, I think a whole book on it. And but, you know, like, I think that we as a human race have not recognize, one, the individual shadow self of ourselves, and that's why instead of overcoming our shadow self, we join a group identity. And within the group identity, we find the superficial connections that we can make, so we're not little boys whistling in the dark. You know, we're actually together with a group of people who are afraid of the same things as us, you know. And instead of gathering upon faith like our forefathers did in the before times in the before four times, like from Rick and Morty, we join up in fear, you know, and that creates more fear, because fear can only bring fear and faith can bring faith. So we join these group identities, and then within those identities we form our opinions, which are not our own opinions. They're led to us by someone else who is still lost and has not, because we're all lost, and the only person that can lead us to freedom is ourselves, you know, because we're the only one that truly knows ourselves. And because we're so lost, we can't recognize the problems within the outside world, you know. So we get caught up in surviving through working and creating this place to live, and then maintaining that place to live, and then maintaining friendships, and it's a constant maintenance of different little bullshit, because we don't want to change, you know. We'd rather maintain little things than have to make a big change in the world, you know. And I think that once when people stop being afraid of themselves and afraid of the world, that's when people recognize climate change. But the problem is that even the left side has created this group identity, and it's still a group identity based upon fear, and it won't allow climate change to become a non-political issue, and so climate change becomes this charged emotional thing that people fight over, and it makes it harder for other people to accept. And if we can make it a non-political issue is my main thing, and make it a human issue, and make it a everything issue. It's probably the biggest issue that we will have. I don't know, maybe this and World War III will probably, if there is one, will be the biggest issues in our lives. And I think if we can all pull together like we did for World War II, in a way for like the European countries are showing, to combat climate change with the same type of vigor, we will be able to overcome it. But as long as we remain divided upon it, we will continue to just battle amongst ourselves, not against the real issue.
I think though, like what you said, like I agree with that. Like we have to make it like a human issue and not a climate change issue. But I think to be able to get done the extent of the things that we need to get done, we need politics to be a part of that conversation. I
agree. We need politics, but okay, but you know what I'm like? It's a fragmented political issue. Like it's not something everyone stands behind because, like, yes, policy needs to change and all that needs to change, but it cannot be an issue that is divided just because of your political belief.
100%.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
But again, there's also a difference between policy and politics. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that. And I think that a big issue, touching on what all of you said, because it's all connected. Everything that you said is connected. I think that a lot of times, especially what Adela said, I think people have such a short... because the scope of a human life is 70 to 90. 90 is a pretty generous estimate nowadays, right? That's with medical technology. That's with our ability to sustain and continue on in spite of our own biology. I think that the human lifespan is so short that we have a hard time reconciling the longevity of natural processes and how long it takes for things to happen, and also the complexity and variance in which things will happen in different areas of the world. And I think that, I think there's been a lot of damage done by well-intentioned arguments. Global warming, you know what I mean? Like global warming, like the inconvenient truth, right? Al Gore, very well-intentioned. However, things already have not progressed in the way that he thought would. And when things don't progress in the way that people subscribe to an idea of, they then reject the idea because they think that the entire idea is wrong instead of just the way that it was predicted is wrong. And I think that a lot of times people who are antagonistic towards scientific development are antagonistic towards change in general. Because, and we kind of touched on this in the last podcast, which is the fact that people, when you are living in a culture which centers itself around material is a finite thing that we envision in our day-to-day lives to be infinite in a certain sense. Like we envision technological advancement to proceed indefinitely into the future. We perceive luxury and the expansion of quality of life to continue to increase indefinitely into the future. And yet, that those things are not necessarily reconcilable with the fact that material culture itself is finite in the sense that at a certain point, everything breaks down. Everything. Except for, I suppose as long as there's people to know about a concept, ideas don't break down because they're abstract. They're human inventions in the sense that they're not actual physical things. But I think that we're so caught up in day-to-day things, whether it be just trying to pay your bills, whether it be you have family members that, like Luke said, might be getting sick that you're worried about, that I think people are too busy or don't have the attention span anymore to actually sit down and actually think about the consequences of not addressing an issue that is so important. And I'm not one of these doom and gloom environmentalists that thinks that climate change is going to ruin everything in the next 50 years. Yeah, some parts of the coast of Florida and the East Coast might be underwater considerably more than they are right now, but it's not like that hasn't happened before. The planet has gone through so many changes, I just think that people have a hard time taking a step back from their own lives to realize that there are some issues that instead of trying to take such a hard stance on mitigating the causes, that we're completely ignoring the fact that we also have to try to adapt to the consequences. Like, yeah, greenhouse gas emissions cause an impact on the rate at which the global mean atmospheric temperature will rise. But that global mean atmospheric temperature rise doesn't necessarily mean the same thing for every part of the planet. And it also is kind of missing the point that it's important to try to reconcile and try to address those issues in terms of the climate impacts, but it's almost more important on a day-to-day aspect to try to look at the human health impacts of things like greenhouse gas emissions. Coal-fired power plants, the acid rain from, the sulfur oxides that are produced from them, I think that the human health impacts are much more important than the climate impacts not in the long term, but in a time scale that people can wrap their head around. It's more important to look at that aspect because whether we like it or not, climate change is happening right now. There are effects that we're seeing day to day that are happening right now. And it's too late to say, oh, if we keep this amount of carbon in the ground, we can stop climate change. It's too late. That's whether or not it's because of human impacts or because of the Earth's natural processes, climate change is happening. It's happened for the last 7 billion years as long as this planet's existed. We also have to look at the fact that climate change is going to happen. And we have to develop policies or management strategies or just plans for what people are going to do when these different impacts actually occur in the day-to-day. Because, for instance, I was just looking up an article on Science Daily today, actually, talking about the fact that historically, in the United States, there's a particular point that the moisture pattern diverges across the continent. It's called the 100th meridian, and that runs directly through the center of North and South Dakota, Nebraska, the western part of Kansas, the western part of Oklahoma, and the western part of Texas. It goes straight down. It's a line. Historically, in the late 1800s, by George Powell, it was hypothesized that this was the point in which the moisture patterns diverged in the continent. East of the 100th meridian, the moisture patterns were much more centered and much more consistent, which allowed for forests, prairies, tall grasses, and swamps and bogs to occur. West of the 100th meridian, because of the rain shadow effect of the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific rain patterns don't reach the Great Plains and they don't reach the Southwest, which results in aridity. Already, it's been discovered that this 100th meridian, the actual area at which the moisture patterns are beginning to diverge, has been moving eastward, meaning that more parts of eastern North and South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas are becoming more arid. And this is something that we can see on the day-to-day. But even though it's happening, we either don't pay attention to it or we don't try to develop strategies to adapt to these changes. Because whether or not the changes happen is out of our control to a certain extent. And I think that people have a hard time coming to terms with the fact that there are problems that technology just can't solve, and that we have to instead also like, have you ever any of you, have you ever heard of Bjorn Lomborg, the quote unquote skeptical environmentalist?
No.
No? Okay, so he's a Dutch environmental scientist. I believe he was originally a statistician or meteorologist or meteorological statistician, something along those lines. And he was taking a look at a lot of predicted climate change impacts that were predicted by the IPCC. And he found that a lot of the predictions weren't taking into account a lot of factors that might actually provide particular benefits as opposed to only detriments related to climate change. Like he talked about the fact that rising average mean global temperatures in the atmosphere might relate to more vegetative growth in a lot of areas. The viability of crops in a lot of areas will be increased. And
longer growing seasons.
I'm sorry?
Like a longer growing season.
Right, exactly. Or just the fact that there's increased CO2 is actually good for plant growth. And even though these things are scientific realities, because of the litany that's surrounding climate change, which is the doom and gloom of it can only possibly have negative impacts, people called him out on the fact that they called him a pseudoscientist. Just kind of like they do with Graham Hancock, all this shit. And he never even claimed to be a scientist. He was just saying that, I looked at all this data, and these are all these things that you guys either missed or didn't care to talk about because they don't fall in line with your particular point of view. And I think that, like Luke said also, a lot of problem with it is just that people are so ready to fall into group identities that they're not willing to reconcile their own fears or aspirations about certain things. And how can you possibly, it's like Jordan Peterson says, how can you tell other people what to do to fix their own lives if you can't clean up your fucking room? You know what I mean? If the room is your own psyche, how can you develop plans to help others if you're not looking at the own issues that you have going on in your own system? Yeah.
Are you familiar at all with Emma Maris?
Not that I know of.
She is an environmental, I don't want to call her like an ethicist per se, but we're reading her in our environmental ethics class, and she touches upon a lot of the things that you're talking about. One of her big ideas is, it's called the Pleistocene rewilding. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I've only ever heard of the Pleistocene overkill.
Yeah, so essentially, what she says, and she's got a big thing about wilderness and pristine environments and protecting them because they're pristine and stuff like that. And she essentially says, look at these are we can't just try and move backwards. And her big issue is people saying with wilderness and wilderness areas and how we want to revert them to pre-Columbian stages and stuff like that. And she's saying why should we stop? Why is that our baseline for history? Because in reality, before the Columbians came here, there were natives that took care of the forests and the plains for thousands of years prior to that. And that if we want a realistic baseline to go back to, then why not the Pleistocene era? I mean, the climates were for the most part similar enough where we can get similar megafauna, we can bring certain elephants back and certain types of big cats back into their natural habitats where they've been essentially extinct from. And that should be a baseline. We shouldn't use a historical something, Christopher Columbus getting there and then us totally degrading the environment and saying, okay, we should just undo what they did. And she's saying essentially one of her big arguments, she's got she's got a book about it. We're just reading specific chapters. But one of her big argument is we should be managing for the situation that we're in now and not a situation that we feel would be more ideal. Like you were saying, you know, climate change is happening and we have these effects on the environments that we're seeing now. We shouldn't be saying like, oh, damn, I wish we can get things back to this way, when we should really be saying, okay, like, this is what I want out of this ecosystem, and these are the benefits from the ecosystem that I want to achieve, and that's what we should be managing for.
Another thing related to that is the whole idea of wilderness really bothers me, because it denotes the fact that it's an area without any human interaction.
Yeah.
Which is such a bullshit idea. I know.
She says that as well. That
Yeah.
You're essentially taking man out of nature, and that you can't by any means separate that, because like the atmospheric effects of like our industry is affecting nature, even if it's not being logged or hunted. Like just the chemicals in the air and in the groundwater and in the soil that travel is affecting it everywhere on the earth, and there's nothing that you can do to stop that. So you just have to adapt with that in mind.
Well, not even that. I mean, that definitely, I didn't even think of it from that point of view. But like, I know I've mentioned it before, and I've only read parts of it online, like parts that are available for free. But there's a book out there called Dispossessing the Wilderness, and it's written. It's basically talking all about how in the late 1800s, the national parks movement was, a majority of it was motivated in part in order to further separate indigenous communities from the land that they've historically lived on. And from a Western point of view, there are areas that we deem to be wilderness and say that there's, you know, we want to achieve a situation where there's no human interaction with this environment because that's the way it was before we got here.
Yeah.
But the thing is, even before humans like Homo sapiens arrived on the Americas, which scientific estimates are now dating might go as far back as 35,000 years ago, which is way longer than we ever thought.
Didn't they just find like footprints in Alaska that were like a couple thousand years older than what they had initially thought of, like the native people like moving down the coast and stuff?
Yeah.
Like they just found new footprints that push that date even farther back.
Well, right, and they're also thinking now that there have been at least 3 different migrations into the Americas, either from the Eurasian Peninsula or from, the Russian Arctic Peninsula, or the Bering Peninsula, like the land bridge, but predating the land bridge as well, or by sea. And the book basically says that the whole idea of wilderness was just a land grab. You know, it was just another way to push indigenous communities off the land. Really, there is no area of the world, because anatomically modern humans, with our brain size, our biology, our physical structure, we've existed for around 200,000 years. The best estimate is about 196,000 years, which, you know, give or take a couple, right?
Yeah.
There's no area in the world that we haven't impacted. I reread this particular book about every other year. It's called Facing West: The Metaphysics of Indian Hating and Empire Building, and it talks mostly about the United States and particular policies, people, whether it be legislators, philanthropists, writers, authors, politicians, whatever it is, different ways that they've justified taking indigenous lands. One of them was talking about when the Massachusetts Bay Colony first really started in the 1630s, how they were amazed to find how clean and pristine all of the old-growth forests in the Northeast were, and they were that way because since time immemorial, meaning as far back as oral human history could possibly go and still be relevant, the indigenous communities in those areas have been burning all the undergrowth every fall and every spring. There are no wilderness areas. Everywhere has been impacted by people, whether it be, like you were saying, through indirect causes, through chemical interactions in the atmosphere due to our own emissions, or whether it be direct consequences from people burning the undergrowth. It's always been a thing. In Africa, when people first started to, when proto-hominids first came down out of the trees and went to the savannas due to changing climates, started eating mushrooms and started expanding their consciousness, if you believe what Terence McKenna said, which to me personally is not a wildly inaccurate or implausible theory. If you take into account, it's not like it's the only thing that caused it, but if you take into account everything else, why the fuck wouldn't hallucinogens expand consciousness? Anyway, it's, those people, even the proto-hominids, the non-Homo sapiens, the pre-Homo sapiens, even they were involved in hack and slash and slash and burn tactics. We've always been interacting with the environment, and I think that it does a lot of damage to viewing people as part of nature instead of apart from nature to say wilderness, because wilderness is a very dangerous term because it's a domino effect. It's a sliding slope, it's a slippery slope, I should say. It pisses me the fuck off, man.
I'm going to get you the name of that Emma Maris book because I think you'll definitely like what she has to say.
Yeah, for sure, dude.
She would 100% agree with you. She says, like, fuck that. Like, we shouldn't protect wilderness because we think it's wilderness. Like, we should protect these things because it's, like, the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's what we need to do. And, like, she's all for, like, protecting, like, charismatic megafauna is what, she says, like, because if we can protect, bears and keep a bear's habitat healthy, then, like, the habitat you would need to keep, bears sufficient and sustainable is, like, a huge tract of land. And by doing so, you would indirectly just be preserving all these natural, landscapes. And she talks about, like, like the Yukon to, what is that? Like the Yukon to Yellowstone, like what they're trying to essentially make one giant tract of land for animals to be able to move northward.
Oh, yeah, what do they call those? Like, migration corridors.
Yeah, exactly. Like trying to build like huge tracts of that and, stuff like that. And she's totally against, like, there's a pretty funny story that she wrote about. I think it was somewhere in the Northeast. There was some like old growth, like hemlock stand that people were freaking out that they wanted to protect. And they were like, oh, like we should save this old growth forest or something like that. And then people went in there and studied it. And they found out that it was actually a second growth forest. And it wasn't an old growth forest at all. It was just an old secondary growth forest. And that people just have the totally wrong like ideas when it comes to what to preserve and what to not preserve or protect or whatever. And that like we should protect and preserve the landscapes because we should and because we get more benefit out of doing that than we would just the monetary gain from like the timber and stuff like that.
The commoditization of them, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I was just talking to Sarah recently about there was an argument between, and this person that she heard the argument between is a friend of mine. His name's Steve. He's a good dude. This guy, Steve. So Sarah's in I believe it's called Women in the Environment or Gendered Studies in the Environment, something like that. And there was an argument that was had between this girl whose name I believe was Lauren, but don't quote me on that, and a guy named Steve, who I know. And I know that he's not a derogatory chauvinist, and she was bringing up some very, very militant, if you want to call it, quote unquote, feminazi style argument about gender and biology and all these things. And all he said was that, true, I'm not disagreeing with you, but you also have to take into account the fact that biologically, males are more easily predisposed to building muscle mass, and females are more easily predisposed to building fat in certain areas. Because of biology, females due to fertility and the way that your biology works.
Nature.
Right, nature being
The
part.
natural order.
Right, exactly. And this girl said she cut him off. She didn't even let him finish his point. Which Sarah, from her perspective, she's a girl, you know, and from her perspective, he was being very non-derogatory or confrontational. This Lauren girl cuts Steve off and says, "Hey, don't call us females, call us women. When you call us females, you're talking to us like we're animals. Humans are animals!
We're animals!
Yeah.
That's dumb.
I'm sorry. That's the end of my rant. I just wanted to put that out there because that relates pretty directly to the whole humans aren't part of nature thing, and it pisses me off so much.
Well, pretty soon we're not going to be animals. We're going to be like cyborgs.
I don't want to think about that.
Oh, damn, I can't find a book. It's called like The Future of Science and Industry.
Hold on, I'm gonna send you guys the picture. Oh jeez. The picture of the map that we have right now of the current projections for the moisture patterns and how they've been moving eastward from the 100th meridian. The solid line is the historical line that diverged the moisture patterns. The dotted one is what's more currently accurate according to new climate studies.
Damn.
It's moved a good bit.
Yeah. It's like almost.
It's the entire
It's like
width.
half a state.
It's the entire width of Indiana that is moved eastward.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Something I think that's also pretty ironic is, like, in my opinion, I think the people that are going to end up digging us out of this shithole are going to be, like, the people of the developing world. Because, like, they're in, like, your Indias, your, you know, parts of Latin America, Southeast Asia, stuff like that. Like, places that are, like, more recently free, like, in quotes. I'm writing a paper right now on, like, the global effects of, like, deforestation and forest degradation on, like, you know, global markets and stuff like that. And one of the authors of the studies I read wrote, like, all the developing worlds have, like, trashed their ecosystems enough to where, like, most of them are just importing timber from the developing nations. Like, in 1998, China had, like, a crazy timber shortage, and they put a ban on all of the logging in the country. And they started importing timber from, like, places in, like, the Asian tropics, you know, like Burma, Cambodia. Indonesia was, like, a major, like, that's where they got a majority of their wood was from the Indonesian tropics.
Kind of like that scene from Lord of the Rings outside of Isengard.
That's just, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And all of these places now, with, like, the help of, like, the United Nations, like, they have that, it's called the REDD program, REDD.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, it's like the reducing emissions of forest degradation and deforestation. Like, they're getting, you know, educated on, like, how their land as they have it now is, like, dependent on these first world countries. Like, they're essentially saving our asses. They're saying, like, hey, you know, we'll pay you to not cut down your forests so that we can, you know, spend, like, we can fuck up our shit a little bit more and send out more carbon into the atmosphere, so long as you guys don't do that and can kind of counterbalance the shit that we're doing. And, like, at the same time, they're learning about, like, these pretty, you know, complex environmental systems, and they're also getting, you know, paid to do it. They're also getting access to, like, the global natural resource market, and they're at, like, the forefront of this whole thing. I mean, India just said that they would, a couple of years ago, they dedicated $6 billion towards increasing their forest cover from, like, 21% to 33% across the country, which is going to store about, like, over 3 million tons of carbon per year. Same thing, like, in Africa, I think it was Kenya or Uganda or something like that. They've been having, like, super positive, like, reforestation efforts in there. And, like, no, as we've grown up, we hear about like the third world countries and like how we have to help them and like all the aid we're sending them. But I think like once this kind of plays out, they're going to be the ones that are just going to save all of our asses.
I have, because I've heard of the RED program. I think in some ways it's good, because obviously we should be planting more trees. Forests are extremely important. Carbon sinks, air purifiers, and just in general, I love trees. My problem with the RED program is the impact that it has on indigenous communities that are being forcibly taken off land that they're supposed to have rights to use timber in, because the governments of whatever nations are saying that we're regulating these forests federally and you're no longer allowed to use the resources, even though they have no other means to sustain themselves without that timber. Yeah, it's just like anything else. It's a complex issue
Give and take. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Like,
give
I
and
know
take.
India they're called joint forest management like committees, and in India they have about 200 million people that are recognized as forest dependent communities.
Okay.
And India kind of took a different approach to it. I'm sure that they're doing something with like RED in the United Nations, but with these joint forest management committees, and they have like 100,000 of them all across the country. They're actually having those like forest dependent communities. They're giving them like, they're letting them stay on their land. They're paying them to like make sure that it's not being overgrazed, and it's not being like, they're not just having illicit timber harvests and protecting it from wildfires. And then they're also giving them a share of the profits that they make from the timber and like natural resources that they pull out of there. And I think that's a pretty good, like you were saying, like how RED kind of fucks some people over to try and like protect them all. India's been, which India still has a bunch of problems. Like they all still like to shit in the streets and stuff, but they're at least like.
But they don't come
of
in little boys' mouths. We found that out.
Yes. They're at least not on a large scale.
Right, yeah.
I'm sure there's still some of that happening.
Well, can't keep it all from, happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, there's just so many things involved in, whether it be resource management or just like correctly valuing different things. I just feel like people are too quick in almost any aspect of any argument. They're far too quick to jump to extremes on either side, and they don't realize that there's so many things involved. Like, there's no black and white with anything. Everything's a grayscale. There's no 0 to 10. There's all the numbers in between. You know what I mean? God, who was it? Is it Terrence McKenna, or it might be Timothy Leary? There's a famous quote, which is, "You're so busy going from A to Z that you forget that there's, 26 letters in between."
That's deep.
Oh, boy. Well, he didn't announce it because he didn't want to interrupt our discussion, but Luke had to leave.
Oh, no.
Yeah. He got a phone call. He had to go. I'm not exactly sure what it pertained to, but hopefully everything's all good.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, just make that known, so we're not like, "Oh, hey, Luke, blank, how do you feel about this?"
Just crickets.
And then, yeah, exactly, just the cricket noise, yeah. Yeah. Well, damn. I'm glad that we had this discussion just for me asking that one question, because this went a lot further than I thought it would.
Yeah, I got a lot of feathers ruffled.
In other
like...
news,
What's
Emerald ash borer is in every county in Wisconsin now, so that's fun.
Goody. Where do emerald ash borers originate from?
Honestly, I'm not too sure, but I feel like most things it's Asia.
It definitely could be. Fucking Asians.
Because we've got like the Asian longhorn beetle and the Asian beetle and the Japanese beetle. So.
They all suck.
Yeah. Gypsy moth, which I'm just assuming is from Asia because everything else is.
Hey.
Is that racist?
Yeah, that is a little racist.
I don't see how that's racist. The gypsies were generally from Eastern Europe.
The gypsies.
That was Indian sounding, Adela.
Gypsy.
I really can't do any other accent but Indian. Like, I always want to speak in a Jamaican accent. It always sounds Indian.
Can you give me an example?
Let's see. No, I can't.
Say down by the beach.
Down by the beach.
No, that sounds Indian.
Yeah, I can't do it.
So yeah, emerald ash borer is from Asia, and gypsy moth also has species in Asia. So I was right. Asia.
All right, Asia. Sorry,
When
Asia.
in
You
doubt-
suck.
Asia's so big. Isn't Russia a part of Asia?
No.
Most of Russia.
Most of Russia.
Yeah. The western, like, fifth of Russia is in Europe.
Yeah, like you know what I think is so weird? That like my mind just cannot grasp, mostly because I don't do my research about it. I just let it mess with my mind. Are like all of those little countries like Kyrgyzstan and like, you know what I'm talking about?
Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
Uzbekistan,
All the stands.
Kazakhstan. How like they look like white Asians, but they speak like their own languages or they speak Russian. It's just so weird to me. Like, where did your people come from? How did you come to be?
They're white Asian.
And like their cultures are just so weird. Like they just have the strangest cultures. Like not in a bad way, but like they're just so interesting compared to like all the other like are you Asian? Are you Russian? What are you?
What are you?
A lot of them are relatively new, like post World War II.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what's also really weird too. Like they're like newer countries. But it's weird because like I said, like they all have like their own like intricate, you know, cultures and like traditions and stuff. It's just super weird to me. It really bothers my mind.
There was so what you're referring to, Adela, those particular nations, the reason why it's such a weird thing is there was Eric's right. It actually was after World War I, not World War II, that a lot of them in particular were designated as individual nations. But what happened was after the Central Powers, it was in World War I, not the Axis powers, but after the Central Powers were disbanded in World War I, the Ottoman Empire, which was predominantly Turkish, was broken up, and a lot of the nations that were under the dominion of the Ottoman Empire were carved up into individual nations, many of which had no say in the geographic designations of what went where, and it was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, or also known as the Asia Minor Agreement. And it was technically actually a secret agreement between the United Nations, France, and the Russian Empire, which they were essentially trying to define the spheres of influence and control across like southwestern Asia. I'm sorry. No. Yeah, the Central Powers and because the Allies in World War I were called the Triple Entente. But it was just it's particularly in this case it's like very arbitrary. Like it was basically whatever they felt like doing. So a lot of those countries that have weird ass cultures, it's because like it was artificially created. Like those cultures have only been around in that particular geographic designation for like 70 years, or in this case, I guess it's really close to 100 now. But it is definitely weird. Like the whole like Jerusalem thing still is strange to me as well. Like the fact that the Israelites are like starving out the Palestinians because they believe that the Palestinians have no right to this land because historically the Jews have always held Jerusalem or whatever, which is bullshit because it's gone back and forth so many times. It's like anything else, man. Like we were just talking about with climate change. People have way too short of a time frame for which they allow themselves to look at things,
Yeah.
It's super weird though. Yeah, but the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and there's a lot of bad blood with a lot of different countries, like I'm sorry, not Palestine. Pakistan and India were one country at one point, and the only reason which they became broken up was an arbitrary decision, because when the British still controlled India, they believed that it would quell a lot of the insurgency between the Muslim populations and the Hindu populations. So they literally said that all the Muslims had to go to Pakistan and all the Hindus had to stay in India, and that became Pakistan and India, which originally was one nation.
World history, man.
Yeah, history's weird, man. When you look at it, you're like, oh, wow, this makes a little more sense now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think something I really enjoy about my history professor that I have here at Point, that I've had for like a few other classes, is like how he always challenges like the narrative of like certain events. Like he's very good at finding like texts that make you view like events in history that you've like have consistently heard about throughout your whole life, but from a different perspective. And I really enjoy that, especially like this semester taking native history with him.
You know what I think about a lot? Like I wonder, because obviously all four of us, being the four of us that are still in this conversation, Hadley, I'm stringing you back into
Hadley.
this.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
Hadley.
Oh, no, you caught me.
It's just, like, I wonder what other countries' history classes are like. Like, their primary education, you know, like, K through 12. Like, what is that like? Because, like, obviously we have our own, and ours is so far from the truth in almost every regard.
I mean, even just parts of our country teach history very differently.
Right. Like literally the South, if you're south of the Mason-Dixon line, is the War of Northern Aggressions as opposed to the Civil War.
Yeah. I had a kid at Columbia who was from Tennessee, and he said that in his history class, the history teacher refused to admit that the South lost the Civil War.
They think that the war never ended.
It's insane. I don't like.
Generally was forced to surrender. They didn't surrender willingly. This war's still happening. What? Yeah.
Something interesting that I learned in my native history class, which like makes a lot of sense after like reading "Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee," was that like when you look at all of the Plains Wars, and like around the time we were like, you know, demolishing all those tribes, if you look at the same time frame that all that's happening, and you look at the Civil War, it's within the same time period. And so what was happening was we already had all those established forts, you know, in not Denver, in like Colorado, North and South Dakota, all of those territories and whatnot. And because the Civil War was going on, essentially they were sending all of their top, you know, generals, lieutenants, people to lead the Civil War were going to the North and South to battle, and they were taking the best people. And so when that happened, they were literally just pulling anyone from those areas, from the North and South, where we already had established states. And they were taking, like, let's say, a doctor that was in the war a few years ago. They were taking him and putting him in a fort in, like, let's go, like, in Colorado, for instance, when the Sand Creek Massacre happened. And so they were sending their worst soldiers, the bottom of the barrels, to deal with the Native Americans. And so when they were sent there, they didn't understand the relationships that were already present with the previous people that were once in charge of those forts. And so that's why a lot of the fucked up shit happened in the Plains Wars was because of that.
Well, not only that, but a lot of it also, because you're totally right. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, but another problem with it was after the Civil War ended, the increased aggression was partly just because there was such, even though it was such a devastating event, there was such an economy built around warfare from the Civil War, and this almost like a literal like artificial intelligence kind of a machine that was built around within the War Department that they needed somewhere to put their efforts. So they figured, oh, we already have all this, economy towards warfare. We already have this entire socio-political machine that's centered around, literally massacring people in the most efficient means possible. Let's direct it towards these native people that are giving us trouble. And the machine was in the east, and they turned it, and it ground up the entire west instead.
Very true. Very true.
Very true.
Very true.
Would you guys like to hear an amazing fact that I learned about trees today?
Yes.
Yeah.
So trees, being the amazing beings that they are,
I love trees.
one of my buddies is in functional tree biology, and she was dropping some knowledge on me, specifically about trees and how they survive in the winter. Once it starts getting colder, the trees, in their infinite wisdom, decide what it wants to do with the starches and its sugars, specifically like within the leaves, and they'll actually turn the starches in their leaves and convert it to glucose, so that it has something to do with like reducing the moisture content in the leaves so that it just doesn't freeze off and die. And the tree, which, I mean, Nick, I'm sure you know this, like most plants, it'll decide whether or not it wants to store that sugar and use it for energy later on, or if it wants to move it to somewhere else in the tree that needs some sort of energy, be it for like covering up a wound or growth or something like that. And in the winter time, since it has no leaves, it takes that stored sugar and starch and will convert it into the chlorophyll in the twigs, and it uses the chlorophyll underneath the bark of the twigs to collect the energy and keep storing that over the winter since it doesn't have leaves on it. So if you break off like a twig and you scratch off like just the bark or the wood on it, and you see like green under it,
right.
Yeah, green under it is actually the replacement of the leaves, so the tree can pull energy in from the sun.
Trees are so smart, man.
They do some shit, dude. Every single day they blow my mind.
I have a really awesome class that I really love this semester. It's a seminar class, so there's only like 10 of us, and there's a lot of, it's basically almost all discussion. And we were just talking about this book called The Secret Life of Trees.
Yep.
And I really want to get it now because it sounds fucking awesome.
Didn't I get you that book for your birthday? I'm pretty sure I got Eric that book for his birthday.
Adela, I know that you mentioned you were going to, but there was another book too. I forgot which one you said you were going to get.
It was called The History of Trees. Oh, the one I got Eric's called The Hidden Life of Trees.
It's the same thing. I think that's what I'm talking about too.
Okay.
It sounded like a cool book. And you're the one that told me to get that one for Eric over
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah. Right. It's like the way they communicate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once I finish this, I've been working on it for a while, but I'm planning on like cracking down on it. But the book I have, it's just called The Tree. And it's essentially just like the life history of the evolution of trees. And it's pretty fucking good.
That's awesome, dude. Magnolias are my favorite angiosperms because they're the first flowering plants.
One of the magnolias...
Or first flowering tree, I should say.
We've got like an ethnobotanical garden in between like our science building that you can just kind of like chill in if you want to have lunch, and like they've got fruit trees there, so you could like, eat some raspberries or whatever you want like while you're studying. But the magnolia there, I'm pretty sure it's a star magnolia. It started to flower, and it just looks absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, there's a lot of magnolias in DeKalb flowering right now. Oh, I love them, man. They're just gorgeous. And it's weird too because I didn't realize until I went down to Florida earlier in the year and like saw a bunch of them down there that like magnolias mostly grow only in like subtropic or tropic regions, and they flower all year long, and like they've just adapted to flowering only in the spring and like early summer out here because we planted them out here.
It's funny.
Yeah,
They can adapt. They have like
they don't give a fuck.
I think it's called like
Trees don't give a fuck.
I believe it's called like the opposite site theory, but it's one of those things where if a tree in its natural habitat grows on like the southern side of the southern or a lowland side of a southern slope, you can plant that same tree on a site that isn't as compatible on the north side of an uphill slope, and it'll grow just the same.
That's interesting. I never heard about that.
Yeah. I'll double check the name of it. I'm pretty sure it's called like the opposite site theory or something like that.
I'd just like to say that I'm really glad that we're all nerds and there's all things that we're each really like into and enjoy talking about, because I feel like there's not enough people that I meet. Like, that's not to say that there aren't people that I meet that are like this, but there aren't enough people, you know, that are just like really into like a couple particular things that they can like really like nerd out about, you know. I feel like people miss out when they're not really into you know, just like pursuing their passions or their interests, and instead they're just caught up in like the milieu of, you know, just day to day, like, oh, I'm gonna check Facebook and like see what this person's posting about kind of shit, you know?
Ooh, I have actually a topic I've been wanting to bring up for a while, and I keep forgetting. I think this would have been a great topic if Luke were here, too. I think he would have a lot to contribute to this. Because he, like, brought it up a little bit when we were talking about, like, climate change and shit. I can't remember the exact words Luke used, but he was talking about how, like, we, like, our society like breaks up into little groups, like, oh, you're a Democrat, oh, you're a Republican, I'm not going to believe what you have to say.
Tribes.
Because all of this shit.
Tribalism, yeah.
And so, essentially, in one of the classes I'm in, we did this activity where we had to write down, I guess, things that we can't talk to other people about without getting upset, was essentially what it was. And then we had to go around the room and write on the board what that thing was that irked us the most. And then we had to talk to somebody that did not agree with that. So, like, let's say I'm for abortion, but you're not. Then I would have to talk to you about it, and we would have to have, like, a conversation. And it was, like, really weird because, obviously, like, this class is for my major, which is a people profession. You're going to be working with people that are from all walks of life and might not have the same values and view life very, very differently than you. And it was like super surprising to me because a lot of them, I wouldn't say that they were getting upset in class, but a lot of them were like, yeah, if somebody tries to argue with me about something that I don't agree with, I just don't want to have a conversation with them anymore. And that just, like, I was very shocked by that. I think, and I'm not sure just because of the way, like, I view the world, but I realize a lot of people do that. And it's not just the people in my class that do that. It's everyone does it. Even I do it sometimes when I don't feel like dealing with people that make me angry about not agreeing with me with things. But, I don't know. I just think it's very strange for people, like I said, that people that want to help others and want to work in communities, that they wouldn't be open to, that they shut themselves off from conversations that they aren't comfortable with.
It's definitely weird that people would be opposed to, like, having their minds changed.
Yeah,
like
that as well.
That their initial thought is like the only thing that they want to stick to, and that there's nothing that.
It's because I think people are afraid of being proven wrong.
Yeah, like I brought up an example. Like I raised my hand and I was like, I told my class, I was like, I'm really shocked that like a lot of you guys are struggling with this. I was like, I have a very good friend. She's probably one of my only friends that is a girl, and we literally cannot be more opposite. Like, she loves Trump. She hates immigrants. She's super, super Christian. There's all of these things that, like, you guys know me, like, I don't obviously agree with, but yet we're very good friends, and I've genuinely learned a lot from her. Like, one of the reasons why she doesn't like immigrants is because her dad a few years ago lost his job and couldn't find another job. And at the time, her brother had cancer and they didn't have any health insurance. And he was applying to all of these jobs and they're like, sorry, we can't hire you for this. But then there was a bunch of, like, obviously immigrants working at the same jobs that he was applying for because they could obviously pay them cheaper. Like, you know what? That's a real fucking problem. Go look at the South. People are really struggling over there. They can't find jobs because all of their coal mines and factories are closing, and they don't have anyone else to blame but immigrants. I mean, like, it's a problem. And why am I going to ignore things that are affecting you because you don't like immigrants? Your struggle is just as valid as an immigrant's struggle.
And I hate that argument, though, because it's like immigrants aren't the ones that are applying and hiring themselves. Like,
yeah, I know. That's
it's
also
the white
what I
people
mean.
that own the company that are hiring them to save money. So you can't be mad at one person.
Yeah, or like if you look at people that are for abortion and against abortion, well, at the end of the day, aren't you guys both arguing about children? Aren't you guys both arguing about babies?
Before you continue with that thought, though, I would just like to point out that nobody is for abortion. People who are on the side of pro-choice are on the side of women having the right to choose a very difficult decision to make about their own bodies. They're not like, oh, I want to kill babies.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
It's not like, only suck out the babies.
Yeah, only suck out the babies. Well, because, like the argument that gets thrown out all the time with abortion, like, all of these, and then there I go right now, subgrouping people. I was about to say Republicans. For the people that don't approve of abortion, then they don't want to take the necessary time to make sure that those babies that they're forcing to be born
taken care of with social programs.
Taken care of through social programs.
Yep.
If you want all babies to be born, you need to have programs for mothers and children that make sure that they will have a successful life, because if not, we're just going to keep having problems in our society.
Yeah. Mothers can't get jobs because the Mexicans took them all.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. They took our jobs.
They took our jobs.
I just wanted to, like, hear what your guys' opinions and, like, if, like...
I thought this was America.
I'm sorry, I thought it was America. No, I mean, I agree with you, man. I mean, I think people are just afraid of being proven wrong and admitting that, oh, I was wrong, you know. People, I don't know if it's a pride thing or if it's just the way that we're raised to believe that we're supposed to stand by our beliefs regardless of what the information is. I think people just are afraid to say, like, oh, I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I'll change my opinion. Or, like, to even try to change their opinion. It seems like some insurmountable task for people, you know what I mean? I love the way Jordan Peterson talks about having reasonable conversations with people, because he describes it as a part of your identity dies, and a part of the other person's identity dies, and through the conversation, you're each forging a new thing. It's its own living being. The conversation creates a new thing that is a part of both of you that wasn't there before you had the talk. I really like that, and I try to live by that kind of shit.
Yeah, and one of, like, my major things, too, that, like, I wanted to, like, point out in my class as well was that nobody's asking you to agree with them. You're just listening to what they have to say. Why is it so hard for you to just shut off your viewpoints and your opinions for a few seconds and just try to understand where that person is coming from?
Who's that guy? I forget his name. He's well known. I'm sure that both of you, and maybe even you, Hadley, know him. But he's been banned from speaking at a lot of different schools because of his viewpoints.
Oh, I totally,
Milo?
Yeah. Milo Jovovich.
Yiannopoulos.
Yeah. Is it Yiannopoulos?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. Jovovich. I don't fucking know. Some Russian-sounding name. He's Italian, probably, or some shit. Greek, maybe.
The crazy gay guy who loves black cocks, but hates other people.
He hates Muslims.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you're banning him from speaking at school doesn't stop his ideas from existing, and not only that, you're actually giving more traction to him because you're making his thing like a big taboo idea, and people are attracted to things that are prohibited.
Like drugs.
Just like drugs, man. Mark Twain. Prohibition's what give things value. I love Mark Twain.
Not fun.
Not very familiar.
No? He's a really interesting guy. There's an awesome documentary my dad watched on him one time. Really interesting guy. One of my favorite quotes of his, which is also a really interesting, just in general quote, is that travel is the antidote to ignorance.
Yeah.
Hadley,
Yes.
you've been very quiet, and I know that you're working on an art project, which is disgusting, in my opinion. But I want you to get more involved.
Is her project disgusting, or is the fact she's working on it disgusting?
No, it's just the project.
Okay.
Which you don't have to elucidate on what you're working on, but
No, I'm a little dumpster fire person who's making Star Wars fan art because it's Star Wars Day, and that's how you get more followers if you post fan art on
it wouldn't
Star
be so
Wars
bad
Day.
if it was like Admiral Akbar or something. But she's painting or drawing or ink sketching. I'm not particularly sure which. She's drawing Kylo Ren and Rey from the new Star Warses, which are trash.
Hey, let me have my shitty space soap opera, okay?
Wouldn't it just be a space opera?
May the fourth be with you.
Oh yeah, may the fourth be with you all.
Yeah.
There's at the forest preserve that's on our campus. They're having a candlelight hike, and it's called "May the Forest Be with You."
May the
Oh.
forest be with you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
But what I was gonna say is, Hadley, if you have any particular thing that you've been thinking about a lot recently, or that you'd like to discuss, I think I can speak for the three of us in that we would love to hear it, because you've said very little, probably partially by our own willingness to go on and on.
I don't really have anything.
It doesn't have to be anything like serious. It could be as simple as like, oh hey, there's a new game coming out that I'm excited about.
Guys, anyone play Stardew Valley? Other than
Yeah.
Nikki, I know you play it.
I work with people that play it.
I showed them it.
Yeah, multiplayer is great. Oh, they added something to the single player. So in Stardew Valley, in case you guys don't know, like you can like romance characters as part of like your farm career. But you can have like all of them, like you can romance all of them, and before it like wasn't a problem. But now they added this new event where if you romance like all of them fully, and you like walk into the local town saloon, an event triggers where they like shame you as a group, and it's like amazing. And then they won't talk to you ever again. Yeah. That's all I got. That's the interesting thing that I could think of.
That's interesting.
Otherwise, yeah.
I have a question for you, Hadley.
Oh no. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure if it's like an okay question to ask, so just don't.
It's about periods.
So just don't respond to it if you don't want to talk about it.
It's about periods.
Oh my god.
I guess my question is, because I just think it's like, I really love, like, I don't even know what to call them, like what, I guess biracial couples. Like, yeah, I guess like, was like meeting like Javi's family, like was it, I guess how was that for you, and how was it for him meeting your family? I guess like how you guys have been like accepted into one another's cultures.
I mean, meeting his parents was fine. His mom understands English, but she doesn't speak a lot.
Okay.
But the English she does speak is to make fun of Javi, which is kind of great.
That's awesome.
I mean, I met a lot of his family from Mexico, and they all were just really welcoming and stuff like that, and really open into like sharing their culture and their like memories together, and yeah, all that stuff. So like, I don't know, it's just really open. Stuff like that.
Good.
I mean, and then on my side there was like small things like when we first started dating and I mentioned to my mom that he has a dog and she's like, "Oh, is it a Chihuahua?" And I'm like, "No."
Oh my
I thought you were gonna say a pit bull.
No.
The Browns love their pits.
And Chihuahuas.
My mom just expected that, yeah. But I don't know. I feel like at this point I just don't even like kind of like notice it. Like I know most of his family's in Mexico, and every now and again his grandma comes from Mexico and makes really good food when she's here,
Oh yeah.
and makes really dirty jokes, which like half the time he won't translate for me. So I'm kind of left standing there going, God, what did his grandma say?
What exactly do you mean when you say that you don't think about the fact that he's Mexican, like, or?
I mean, no, I think about that, but I mean, I feel like I don't like reflect like, oh wow, like we're two completely different cultures and we're dating, you know?
Yeah.
It's also like the same thing in that he's super religious and I am not at all, and it's not like something we reflect on the daily. It's just kind of like, I don't know.
It's just there.
Yeah, we're a unit,
Yeah.
and that's there. So
I love Javi, man. He's a really good dude. I'm very happy that you two make each other happy. And I remember that the very first time I met him, I gave him shit. You know,
I think everyone did.
I was just like, I'm pretty sure what I said was, if you ever do anything to hurt Hadley, I'll hunt you down.
Yeah,
Something along those lines.
I remember we went to your house. We went to and we had like a sit down on the front porch of
Yeah, exactly.
the Algonquin house. Yeah, that was fun.
It's weird, man. Like, people, I feel like from the outside expect relationships between people who don't have most things in common to be like more different than they are, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I never, honestly, like, I did a little bit at the beginning just because I was getting used to like walking with her and stuff, but like I never really think about the fact that Sarah's blind, you know? She's just like Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's just they're just the person. It's like it takes the whole group mentality out of it.
Yeah.
You know, like, oh, like he's part of like he's Mexican. Like it takes that group mentality out of it instead of it's like he's Javi or that's Javi's mom. It's like, oh, she speaks Spanish, but it's like, yeah. I mean, it's his mom. She speaks Spanish. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful.
That's beautiful.
It's spacious sky.
Beautiful.
Oh, wait. So question, though. Eric and Adela, when are you two together going to be back in Illinois?
Let me pull up a calendar. Isn't it weird, guys? I graduate in 2 weeks.
Oh my
dude.
gosh! Congratulations.
Ew.
Is that about the art project or graduating?
Graduating. We will be home Sunday the 20th, and then I will be coming back to Stevens Point the 23rd, but Eric will be...
I'll be in Illinois until the 25th.
So Friday.
Okay.
That Friday. So
Shit, man. Adela, what the fuck?
Sorry, son.
You're gonna miss my birthday.
What the fuck means your birthday?
The 25th. Eric knows.
Oh, damn.
I pointed at it at the calendar while you said it, Nicholas.
I'll see if somebody could take my shit from me, Nicholas.
What?
Oh, actually, I don't work on that Friday, so I could drive home if I wanted to.
I just want to do something with y'all. And Sarah really wants to meet the two of yous, because I talk about you all the time.
Well, I'm probably going to be leaving like Friday morning because that's when I'm being picked up for Colorado.
He's leaving on your birthday.
Yeah. I'm being picked up in Illinois, though. I guess I'll double check when they're going to grab me. But
They're going to scoop you up like a little bundle of
I mean,
joy.
we can do something the night before, though, most likely. The
Yeah.
24th?
Yeah, probably, actually. Considering that the job I have is an internship, I was told that it's not super difficult to take days off as long as you're not like taking a whole week off here and there.
Uh-huh.
I could probably take. I mean, it's my fucking birthday. I could probably take it off.
So you can go to curveball, you're saying?
No.
Oh.
So you're saying we're gonna buy last minute tickets to Scamp?
No. So, well, I wanted to go to Scamp, but Sarah's got surgery the weekend of Scamp, so we just can't go.
Yeah, the week after curveball, I applied to get into it, but I won't know till next week whether I got accepted. But our school is having an urban forestry site design competition with the University of British Columbia in Canada. And if I get accepted, it'll be like two teams of 4, and it'll be 8 students from Point and 8 students from UBC. And essentially the school will pay for us to spend a week in Canada doing this like urban forestry site design competition. And like they'll pay for the airfare, the hotels, transportation, and all we have to spend money on is like food and if we don't have a passport. And I have a passport, so.
Damn.
If all works out well, I'll go from fucking Denver to New York, and then right after New York over to Canada.
That's pretty cool, dude.
Yeah, it would be pretty sweet. It's the first time they're doing it, and my advisor is putting it on, so I'm hoping maybe being like the vice president of the Urban Forestry Club and his advisee, and I work for him at Tree Haven, that maybe he'll like think about it more.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. It pays to have connections.
Yeah.
Oh,
Gosh,
Adela.
Yes.
So, although we're not going to go to Scamp, with what we've been doing for saving money, Sarah and I definitely would like to go to the Alpine Dead & Co. shows, and we were wondering if you wanted to come.
Possibly.
My buddy, you know Austin Ryan?
Is he the dude that started my car?
No, that's Ryan.
No, that's a different Ryan. His name
Okay.
is also Ryan. But
Okay.
Austin Ryan went to Jacobs. He was an Apes as well. He was
Really?
he was a year younger than us.
But
he's a good buddy of mine. He played soccer and he wrestled. But he's going to the Alpine shows too. So
Okay. There's also a small festival in July called Down on the Farm that I think we're going to go to. It's like a 3-day camping kind of thing, and it's like a bunch of decent bands, but it's only like $100 for the whole weekend.
Not bad.
Nah. And I also really want to go to Shoe Fest. I think we're basically, instead of going to one big fest, we're going to go to like a couple small fests.
That's good.
And plus, like, Sarah's never been to a festival, and I want to make sure she could handle it, because there's like a lot of people. And like, sometimes she gets like overwhelmed with a lot of people, considering she can't like see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to like kind of like let her get her toes wet before like pushing her in the pool, so to speak.
Yeah, man, I'm kind of mad because this whole week Live Nation was selling $20 tickets to any show, and like the Dead & Co. $20 tickets like sold out super fast.
Slightly
Doesn't
Stupid.
surprise
Did you see
Yeah.
if are they sold out too?
No.
Wait, when's Slightly
Yeah.
playing?
In August?
In August, yeah.
$20.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
even if they're not 20, I'll fucking go. I don't give a shit.
Well, it's because it's like National Ticket Week or something.
Yeah.
I don't care. I just want to go to Slightly.
I
go
I
to
would like
Slightly.
to go to Slightly, but I don't know if I'm going to be gone for curveball. by
I'll go
then.
to Slightly Stupid with you, Nick.
Good.
That'll probably be the only show I could go to. I mean, like, I told my mom, like, months ago for graduation that I just wanted tickets to Dead & Co. And, like, do the same shit that we did a few summers ago. Like,
Bark
where we
River.
just stayed- where we stayed, like, Bark River and had, like, the bus pass and shit like that. But, like, it's honestly so close to it, I don't even know if they're still going to have, like, bus passes.
But
Since, like, more people
we
know
ordered
about...
them like a month before last time. I'm sure we'd be fine.
Well, I ordered mine, like, super early.
Oh, well, I ordered mine like a month before, and they still had them, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But, like, I definitely, like, don't really have the funds to pay for the tickets myself. That's why I asked for them for graduation. But I'm like, 110% certain my mom did not get them.
I'll be chilling in Watkins Glen. Don't need no bus.
Just put it on credit card.
Yeah.
Nick, my credit card cannot handle anymore.
Sure.
Any more charges
Sure
to
you can.
be real right now.
Come on, just start a new credit card.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I agree.
Fucking Dead and Co, bro.
Kevin.
All right. Well,
Right. Oh.
I would love to keep podcasting, but I have a 10-page paper that I've been working on, and I'm only a page in, and I should
All right.
probably like get back
Almost
to it.
there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to have to say adieu.
I do.
Alright.
Adieu.
Well, Hadley, thank you for joining us as usual.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. I wish we would have gotten more discussion with you, but I think we just kind of monopolized the conversation a little bit.
It was good conversation though, so it's
Cool.
good listening.
Cool. Well, hopefully that means other people will enjoy it. Make sure to share on your Facebook and tell your friends.
Yeah, I was gonna share the last episode, but then I remembered I like shared it and then I had to delete it because we talked a lot about dope and mushrooms, and I just like had one of my bosses add me on Facebook, so I have to wait till the cleaner episode.
This was a pretty clean one.
Yeah, this was one they would approve of.
Until right now.
Oh.
Just don't listen to the last episode.
I mean, I'm pretty sure if one of your bosses was going to listen, they wouldn't listen to the full 2 hours.
Sure they would. They're very supportive.
Oh, well, either way.
Bye, y'all.
Love you.
Bye.